Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways, Dorion and subsequently Kinghorn subdivision. We are just on the west side of this unnamed road. We are north of the community of Nipigon, Ontario. And so what we're going to be doing today is picking up where we left off on a previous hike, which we did last weekend, where we came to the section just to the east of us, between Hogarth Station and McCaskill Station. McCaskill Station is just to the east of us over there. So again, we're on the west side of this unnamed road. I call it Cameron Falls Road. That's not technically correct because the road that we kind of came in on, the highway access road here is Highway 585, and that's technically called Cameron Falls Road, but there's no name to this. And so we are close to the former community of Cameron Falls, so I just call it Cameron Falls Road. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working our way from this spot here to the west, about 4 miles, just past Cameron Falls Station and on the way to the Nipigon River Bridge. Before we get started here, just a couple of things to show you here, or at least one thing to show you here. So what we have here is the former private crossing sign for this road crossing here. So again, level crossing here, so use at your own risk. And there's supposed to be a flanger sign here somewhere. We were here a couple of weeks ago, so last weekend we were doing that section, but a couple of weeks ago we were through this section here, and just sort of going over things and having a look and to see if there were things that we haven't seen. So this is another redo section. This is a section that we did a couple of years ago. So back in late August of 2020, we were through here. And so again, we're redoing this because things have changed, information has changed, and we want to make sure we provide the most up-to-date information on this. Luna sees a grouse. Yeah, I'm looking for that flanger sign and I don't see it. The one on the other side of the road is there, which we saw in our previous hike, but unless this one's kind of hiding somewhere, it's nowhere to be seen. Okay, so let's hop up on the bike here and start our venture. So just a quick note about this one here. So this is one of the ones that I'm not particularly keen on doing. We have to do this one backwards because this road is the only access to this area until you get below Parmachene Station, which is about 7 miles away. So not a particularly ideal situation. I don't like doing them backwards, as you've probably heard on previous hikes, but don't really have a choice to do it this way. And that's why I was here a couple weeks ago, just to check things over. And actually we were here last fall as well. And we're going to be using a little bit of footage that we shot back then. So while we have a moment here, we'll do our history lesson, even though I have to interrupt myself a few times. So this railway line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental line. The Canadian Northern Company got its start back in Manitoba back in 1896. So here's our first interruption. So we do have a culvert. You can see the mileage on the culvert, 115.30. So that is the mileage on the Kinghorn. And then there is a different mileage for the previous entities, which we will explain. So we're going to pause here for a moment and go down and have a look at this culvert. All right, so we've made our way down here below the grade. I don't know, we're probably 15 feet down or so. It's kind of not in a great spot. It's kind of very wet here. My feet are now soaked from standing here. But basically what we have is we have probably about a 3-foot diameter or so concrete culvert. Again, you can see how wet it is here. This is about as close as I can get to the culvert itself. I can't even really see the condition of the culvert. So what we're going to do is we'll jump the grade and then hopefully things will be a little bit better on the north side. All right, so we've made our way down here on the north side. It's not much better, maybe marginally. So here you can see the culvert. You can't even really see the opening of the culvert. It's so obscured with all of this growth that's happening here. You can see there's a huge pile of ties that have kind of accumulated here right beside the opening. It looks like the culvert seems to be working okay, but again, it's just so low and wet here. I can't get any closer to the culvert. It looks like there's a little bit of deterioration up here, closer to where the grade are. But again, you can't tell with all of this, all of the tree growth and all of the debris down here. All right, so we'll make our way back up to the grade and just continue heading west towards Cameron Falls. Lots of road traffic on the road there. Like, this is probably the 7th or 8th car that's gone by. All right, so we're back in the saddle after checking out that culvert. So as I was mentioning, Canadian Northern got its start in Manitoba back in 1896, buying up some charters and things like that. And eventually, they embarked on their first major project, which was the construction of a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg. And that line was constructed between 1899 and 1902. So we have another interruption. So here we have the junction box for the fiber optic cable that runs alongside the grade. And so here you can see the mileage, 115.44. Somehow or another, I don't know if that's right, because that culvert was 115.30. We haven't gone 0.14 of a mile. I don't know. Just seems a little off to me. Anyway, so Canadian Northern opened their line between Port Arthur and Winnipeg in 1902, and shortly thereafter they began building all kinds of lines throughout the prairies. Canadian Northern became sort of synonymous with rail lines in the prairies, particularly in the northern part of the prairies. And around the same time, they also started acquiring lines and building some lines north from Toronto, eventually reaching up into the Sudbury area. Now, it was around this time that Canadian Northern realized the long-term viability of their company depended on a transcontinental connection. Now, the problem was that Canadian Northern wasn't particularly keen on building all the pieces of that transcontinental connection, particularly this one. So building between Port Arthur and the Sudbury area, specifically Ruel, where the end of steel was. And the reason for that was the construction was going to be difficult and therefore very expensive. And so they looked at a whole bunch of different options in terms of you know, how to sort of mitigate that situation. And that included, you know, trying to set up a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific. None of that worked out. And so Canadian Northern was forced to build. And so again, construction began in 1911. And the last spike was driven on New Year's Day, 1914. And the line opened for traffic a year later in 1950. Now, around that time, Canadian Northern was already starting to experience some financial issues. And basically that was a direct result of construction costs. So building through the mountains of British Columbia, building this section, and then all kinds of issues associated with World War I. And unfortunately, a couple years later, by 1917, the company was basically bankrupt and had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And in 1918, a year later, Canadian Northern was forced to merge, amalgamate, whatever kind of descriptor that you want to use, with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines known as the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger produced Canadian National Railways. And so the nationalization process took about 5 years. And so it was completed in 1923 with the absorption of the Grand Trunk lines. And in 1923, the name of this line changed. It had been the Nipissing Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway, and it became the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it continued to operate as the Dorion Subdivision until 1960, when there was a major reorganization with CN. They adopted their modern logo, and they did a lot of rejiggling and realignment with some of their lines, including this one. So the Dorion subdivision was merged with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, and the whole line became the Kinghorn from Long Lac to Port Arthur. And the line continued to operate until 2005, when CN decided to discontinue service, and the rails were pulled up between 2008 and 2005. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to stop here, is because we actually have a little historical point of interest. So, there is a station that is to the east of us called McCaskill. We went through this in our previous video. McCaskill was not its original name. Its original name was Cronin. Then its name became Cameron Falls, and then it became McCaskill. There's a whole sort of saga with that station. Eventually, there was a station that was created up here, and we're going to be talking more about that when we get there, called Cameron Falls. Now, what happened is that around about 1917, work began on a massive hydroelectric project on the Nipigon River, which is, you're going to see it, which is just to the west of us here. And that became the first of 3 generating stations on the river, that one being known as Cameron Falls. So what happened was I have to get my notes out here because there's so much stuff going on. So in 1919, there was a stop that was established at milepost 66, and that was on the mileage on the original Canadian Northern and later Dorion subdivision, which is milepost 115.7 on the Kinghorn. So that is roundabout here, okay? And so that station was created in 1919, and it was known as Cameron Falls. Now, it only stuck around for 1 year. And what happened is in 1920, the name Cameron Falls was used to rename the station at Cronin, which is to the east of us. And this station was moved back about 4/10 of a mile. You're going to see where it is, and it is renamed Hydro. And hydro is a very common term that is used around here. Hydro is obviously short for hydroelectricity, but at least in this part of Canada, I don't know about the rest of Canada, but hydro is often used to denote electrical power. Right? So people will say, like, did you get your hydro bill? They won't say, did you get your electricity bill? Did you get your hydro bill? And so anyway, somewhere here was this original Cameron Falls station in 1919 for that 1 year. You can kind of see a little bit of the area here. You can see we're very close to this access road here. And you could probably kind of imagine maybe some sort of like little spur or something coming off here. You will see there's some spurs up at where Hydro was, and eventually Cameron Falls Station. But you could kind of see there might have been something in this area here, right, in terms of a stop to feed into those hydroelectric projects. Okay, so let's keep pushing ahead. Here you can see it's we're in the third week or fourth week of October. It's a nice day. It's nice and warm. The sun is supposed to poke out later today, but it's actually nice because it is a little bit cloudy, so kind of helps with the shadows. You can see most of the leaves and such are down. Just the tamaracks are left sort of turning color. Here you can see some of the remnants of the line. Okay, so you can see a rail connector bolt and a nut. Okay, fish plate bolt and nut. This line used primarily jointed rail. There was a few sections of continuously welded, but mostly all jointed rail. So here we're coming through one of the numerous grown-in sections that you're going to see as we go through this section of the line. You can see the vegetation really encroaching on the grade. Lots of alders and some tamaracks. Good visibility here with most of the leaves being down. Even the tamaracks you can see are losing their needles. The tamarack is a species of larch. It's almost like we say this every episode. And one of the few. They're a deciduous coniferous tree, so they lose their needles. All right, let's zip you ahead a little bit here to our next stopping point here. All right, so we're coming up to our next stopping point here. You can obviously see there is a milepost marker. It's one of a few we're going to see on this section of the line. It has its obligatory bullet holes in it. So this is milepost 116. So again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn. The mileage again for the original lines is slightly different because the Kinghorn started in Long Lac. The original line started in Jellicoe. So to calculate the mileage for the original lines, what we have to do is we have to subtract the 49.7 miles, and so milepost 116 becomes milepost 66.3. Now we do have a bit of a 2-for-1 here because we do have the milepost 116 marker, and over here we actually have a culvert, and so we do have an old style concrete culvert that's passing under the grade, and so you can kind of see the collar part of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop down and have a look. All right, so we've made our way down here on the north side of the grade, which you can see just up there. And so what we have is I haven't seen one of these in this area. So basically we have a segmented concrete culvert. It's about a 4-foot diameter culvert. But what's neat about it is it actually has the collar to it. So if we bend down here, you can actually see for the most part, the culvert's in pretty good shape, except for this first part here, for this initial part. And I think what's happened over the years is the weight of the concrete collar here has basically caused this, you can't really see it from this side, we'll have to wing around to the west side, has caused basically this first segment of the culvert. So you can see that there's a separation that's happened here. You can see quite a bit of debris in here. So if we come up over here, we can basically see how the collar in that first segment has pulled apart, and there's a big kind of opening up here on the top. The rest of it actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump the grade and go take a look at what's happening on the north side. All right, so we've made our way down here on the north side of the grade, and so here you can see the downstream end of the culvert, so the sort of the non-flanged end, and the water's kind of flowing this way. I'm guessing it eventually will make its way into the Nipigon River. You can see this side's in pretty decent shape. There does look like there's a bit of separation that's sort of happening right here, and you can see all of these trees that are kind of growing up on top of the top of the culvert right behind the collar here. If we make our way over here, just right there is actually the spur or series of spurs here at Cameron Falls. So just right up there. And so if we peek down here, so again, you can see the culvert again. Some of them look like they've been kind of shifted a little bit. Again, particularly this first one here. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll hop back up on the grade here and just continue our journey to the west.